Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this HCTalk podcast. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley, and we have two special guests on the program. One, once again, and another who's new, and they're both with Ember Hope here. I guess I say Newton, but you have more facilities than that. The last time that we had a guest on the program, we talked about all the things that were going on with the Newton site. And I'll just say again, it's it's Hope Estates, but it's Ember Hope Estates here on the Youthville campus here in Newton that most people would see a lot of construction going on, and I'd say it's moving very fast at this point in time, so I don't know how much longer it's going to take before you guys are going to have people moving in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's really cool. There's whole buildings up now, so you can really see how they're starting to take shape. It's really cool.
Right, absolutely. Okay, for the audience, I just want to go ahead and just, instead of trying to give some formal introduction to the both of you, because you were on the program before and talked about yourself and your life, and people can go back through the archives and they can look at that. But also, we didn't have Tamber on the program, so just Tamber, start with just who you are and what you do and how you're involved with Ember Hope, and then we'll kick it back over and just start into the podcast.
My name is Tamber Rouse, and I'm the Director of Donor Relations at Ember Hope. I've been there about 4 years now. I think it was 4 years in April. I kind of started part-time there. I was working at Health Ministries Clinic here, and I started working PRN just to kind of make some extra money, single mom, 3 kids, so... And when I did that, they kept kind of trying to convince me to come on full time. So eventually this spot opened up, and Marty came on as president. And I'd never thought about doing development really, because I'm a licensed social worker. I've been a social worker for 16 years now. So it wasn't really something that I didn't even know. I mean, when you're a social worker in child welfare, you have no idea what development is. You don't know where the money comes from. You don't care. You just do what you're supposed to do. So he kind of asked me if I'd ever thought about it, and I was like, well, no. And I was like, I don't know how to do any of that. He's like, well, that can all be trained. And it's actually been really beneficial because I'm able to kind of help teach everybody on the team that's not familiar with child welfare and social work how to talk that lingo with all of our donors and everything. So my background, I come from Southwest Kansas. I lived in Cimarron my entire childhood between Dodge City and Garden City. And I've kind of worked, several different, child welfare jobs from there and social work jobs. Was in Nebraska for a while at the Department of Labor, working veteran services. I've worked Medicaid. I've done all kinds of things. But child welfare has always been my passion, and I wanted to get back into it. Whenever I did casework, whenever Autumn was one of my kiddos, I still consider her one of my kiddos. I got really burnt out really fast. It's something that, sometimes you don't feel like you have a lot of support and you're just kind of floating. And of course, straight out of college, it was traumatizing. So I still kind of have a lot of, PTSD related to that. But I really wanted to find a way to get back into child welfare, so I actually started volunteering with the CRB, the Citizens Review Board, here in Newton at Harvey County, the 9th District Court. And that's basically where we take on, we're community members that review cases that are assigned by the judge. They're the really complicated ones typically, and we kind of review why they're kind of stagnant, what some of the issues are, and then we make recommendations to the court on court orders that we think could help move the case forward. So I kind of started doing that whenever I came to Newton, just so I could kind of step back into it and serve that passion. And then, coming back on to Ember Hope, I didn't really want to do casework, so that's where I was kind of hesitant to step in full time. But then whenever I was offered this opportunity, it helps me serve that passion of kids while, also being able to take care of myself mentally and emotionally, because that's just something that, not a lot of people realize is that, social workers take that trauma home, and it's really hard to deal with. So
yeah, and then of course there's an interesting relationship here for those that didn't hear the podcast last time. Just Autumn, explain a little bit that she was your caseworker at one point in time. So this relationship has blossomed over time from when you were just a real young person. And you had to have been pretty young too when you were, it's like.
I was fresh out of college.
Right.
I'm only about 6 years older than her, so I'm not that old.
Well, that's what I'm saying is there got to be pretty close age there, you know?
That's we tell people that all the time, and you could see they're doing like that math meme. You know what I'm saying? They're like trying to draw the line.
How old are you and how old is she? You know,
they're like, she just must look really young for her age.
Yeah, they're like, which one of you made like some kind of a pack or something? You know, like what's going on? But Tamber was my caseworker. You were my IL caseworker, my independent living caseworker IL. So I was on my way aging out of the system. So I was like 16, 17. And then, like she said, she was a new graduate. So we were close in age. And then coming back into child welfare. And then when I applied for Ember Hope, she messaged me and she's like, hey, she didn't recognize my married name, but my email still has my maiden name in it. And she's like, hey, I think that this is your application coming in. I work at Ember Hope. And I was like, what? Like, I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So yeah, it was really cool to get to connect almost 15 years. Yeah, 15 years later.
And then I got to say, coming here, and then one of the main things that we had discussed last time was the Hope Estates. And given what you had done with your being a case manager or a caseworker for people that were aging out of the system and needing to go into some kind of transitional living facility, and then you being in the situation where you were the recipient of that or a client in need of that, then you tie in Ember Hope or Hope Estates, and it's kind of like that's because you could have very easily been a recipient of that, and then she would have been the individual that was helping you get into that program.
Yeah, it all feels very serendipitous. I think that's the most accurate word I could use is just serendipitous. You know, the timing of it is all crazy. And especially, I think I mentioned this last time that we were all really floored to have gotten the low income housing tax credit grant. Tamber had mentioned, usually you have to apply 2 or 3 times, and we got it on the first application. And so and then again, Hope Estates will be open during our 100th year in operation, our 100th year in service. Like that's when it will open. So, ushering in this next century of care by building this brand new facility just steps away from the 100-year-old Libby building that served as the original orphanage. It's just, just talking about it like gives you goosebumps.
Yeah, and a time I would say in history in which is probably just as needed as what it was 100 years ago, if not more. I mean, there's a lot going on in our society today, and there are a lot of people in need. There's a lot of kiddos in need, and then there's situations where, unfortunately, some youth do find themselves need to be placed in what we would call the system, and then from there that system operates in a way in which can provide the help that's necessary in order for youth to ultimately age out with care and compassion and structure and things that are needed for them to be a well-rounded, developed adult, right? And then this comes in where you're just doubling the program to just not meet youth, but to meet all age groups, right? So the reason that we wanted you to come back out on the program was because there are some new things that are going on. I know that we had talked briefly before the program as far as what kind of things we might cover on the program, so I'm not completely in the loop when like, oh yeah, whoa, but the idea that it does take finances to make an organization like this run, especially being a nonprofit. You really heavily rely on the gifts that are provided from people who have a heart and a mind to give to this organization. But you also, in an organization like that, can't just say, hey, mail a check to this. You really have to be able to put yourself out there. You have to make sure that you're doing what you all can do through different events and things like that. So what you have some events coming up. I mean, who wants to speak on the events that you all have coming up?
Well, the next event that we've got coming up really fast that we've been preparing for is our Ignite Hope Fest, which is kind of a combination of a poker run, a car show, and a concert. And it kind of came to fruition with one of our maintenance guys. He has a band that he's, kind of played with in the past. And he said, I'd kind of like to do something for Ember Hope. And I was thinking this is kind of something I could do. And we kind of expanded that within our team, as like, what else could we do, with this to bring in more people. And, we had kind of pushed around the idea of, doing a car show and, poker run and things like that, just to kind of, have something fun. And so really kind of the pinpoint of this is trying to bring back awareness to Ember Hope. A lot of people, even in Newton, don't realize that Ember Hope is still, it's Youthville. Right. They remember it as United Methodist Youthville or UMY, and they kind of separate the two. They don't realize that we're the same entity. We just went through some rebranding, and we're the same thing, been the same thing for 100 years. It's just kind of changed the name. So, we've been in Harvey County for 100 years. This is our home. And we really want to re-engage the community within Harvey County and, trying to bring things home. We want our local community to wrap around Ember Hope and know that they're welcome on campus. We want them engaged with our kids and everything that we're doing. So the car show is going to start at Twister City in Park City.
Poker run.
The poker run. The poker run's going to start there, and then it's going to go into Sedgwick, and then it's going to go to Newton, and then it's going to go to Moundridge, and then it's going to stop at Heston High School. And then we're going to have a car show there. So the one in Newton, of course, is going to stop on the Newton campus, but we're going to have that car show there, and then we're going to invite everybody into the high school for the concert. So the concert's going to be like, 70s, 80s, 90s rock music, and I got talked into singing backup vocals for that. So
yeah, she did.
I'll be singing.
Yeah.
So we've been working really hard on practicing. I've been practicing with the band and trying to get some of those final things, taken care of. So we're really excited about it. I think it's going to be really cool. So we're hoping everybody will come out, and we're selling tickets on Eventbrite, but we also encourage people to come and register the day of. So even if they show up at Twister City at, noon?
Yeah, I think it opens at noon, and then the riders leave at 2.
Yeah. So they can show up there and, get their cards and registrations and everything like that. And then, once they get to Heston, if they want to do the car show, they can register there. The tickets for the concert are free, so we want anybody and everybody to come and view it. I think the auditorium can hold like 700 people, so cool. So hopefully we'll fill it up.
So that's an inside event, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And then I guess just for those that I've been involved with nonprofit organizations, and I just got to say, what you all are endeavoring to do, that takes a lot of hands for a lot of lifting and a lot of planning, and not only that, but you kind of acted like it was just, it just came about. No, there was some planning that went here, right? Yeah. So I mean, there's got to have been a lot of planning and scheduling and reaching out to different communities, obviously, and people, and saying, hey, how do we all do this together? I often say many hands make light work. Mm-hmm. So what kind of, you can't just brush over this. This is something that is a huge thing here.
Yeah, we have been planning it for at least a year. Yeah. I know that was when the preliminary discussions began, was roughly about a year ago. And we all banded together and we said, this is going to take all of us, especially with these 3 major events. I mean, even just doing one of those things is an undertaking, and then combining all 3. So we said, okay, let's put our heads together. We don't have an event planner on staff. We all just take turns and do it together. Right. We have awesome, our whole development team is doing it, but we also have awesome staff within Ember Hope who are volunteering. I know our friends and family, like my husband is scoring the poker cards, right, as well as riding in the poker run. And, we just have a lot of people willing to step up. And we just really hope that the community shows up too, because we just want them, to have fun. This is a fun way to get engaged. It's a great way to come on campus and get an up close look at everything going on. But then it's foster care month. Actually, May is Foster Care Awareness Month. And this is, basically the last day of the month. And so we just kind of want it to be like a closeout celebration of, everything that we've accomplished so far this year. And then, again, hoping to hopefully do this again next year in honor of the centennial and just build on that.
Very cool. Okay. So just, Autumn was on the program in the past and gave a lot of whys to how she found herself where she is today doing what she does with Ember Hope. And we talked a little bit about the past of Ember Hope and where it came from. And you both had mentioned on the program so far now about, this is 100 years. Tamara said that this is something that's obviously, for those that don't know, it's not an organization that has changed hands in as much as it's the same organization that's changed brands, right? So with that, I guess just kind of, if somebody would just briefly, right, for those that are watching the program that haven't had a chance to watch Autumn's, and I would highly recommend doing that, because you're going to get a lot more than what you're going to get on the program today as far as the history and everything. What's the why behind? Well, first off, for just briefly, who does Ember Hope serve? Why do they serve them? And then how did the both of you find yourself in a situation to say, this is what I want to do? The why behind why you do what you do. And then ultimately, right, to piggyback on that, the why of what you're doing right now.
Well, as far as what Ember Hope does now, we cover across the whole state of Kansas as far as foster families. So we have different sections now, and since we took over the contract in Sedgwick County, we've kind of branched out, and part of that's for financial reasons, and part of it's contract, all that kind of thing. But I won't go into all that. So all of our foster homes, those are under our child placing agency contract, which we have through Youthville. So Ember Hope Youthville has all of those, and we also have our functional family therapists, and they cover some counties out in western Kansas. And we also have our residential facilities, which are under Ember Hope Youthville. So you might hear C3, you might hear PRTF, you might hear Ember Hope Girls, because those are our kiddos that live on campus. So they're in our PRTF, which is a psychiatric residential treatment facility. We take 10 to 18-year-old girls, and they have to go through a screening process, with their mental health provider and everything to make sure to determine if they're eligible. Typically, they qualify if they're a danger to themselves or others. And it's an intense setting where, we try to make it as homey as possible. The facility is really nice. That's what we call C3. It's Cottage 3. And we typically have we can have 10 girls there, but it depends on how many staff we have at that time as to how many we can take. But they really try to have goal-focused treatment and, positive reinforcement, and having individualized goals set, really trying to help them learn some coping skills and get them stabilized so that they can, get back out into the community and be a successful part of the community and know how to interact with others. A lot of these girls have experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of mental health concerns, so it's really stabilizing them. And then on the flip side, we have Ember Hope Connections, which is what our Sedgwick County contract is under. So that's our case management contract. So we handle any kiddo that comes into state custody in Sedgwick County, which is a huge undertaking. Sedgwick County actually has the highest percentage per population of kids in state custody.
And the highest population in the state, really.
Yes.
Sedgwick County.
Yeah. So there's like 1,600 kiddos in state custody just in Sedgwick County alone. They make about 30% of all of the kids in state custody in Kansas. So it's a huge undertaking, and unfortunately, the trends are still rising.
Right.
And there's still a lot of study as to why that is. So our case managers, we have several different, there's just so many different spiders, that go out within those programs. There's crossover, which is the kiddos that are coming from juvenile detention into foster care. We've got independent living, which are the kiddos aging out, which sometimes you'll hear referred to as APLA, which is another planned permanency living arrangement, is what that stands for. We've also got reintegration, which are kids that we're trying to get reintegrated back home with their families. There's adoption, where kids, the parental rights are no longer intact. So there's just so many different facets.
Right.
And we have over 500 staff, that are working that. And then we have what is our team, which is Ember Hope Foundation. We're the ones that are trying to make all of that money. And, a lot of people think, well, why do you need to raise money? The state gives you all of that money. Yeah. We hear that all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's just, the fact of the matter is, yes, we do get money for the contract, for all of the services that we do. We bill insurance, those types of things, but that does not cover everything. That covers the bare necessities of things. And we really want to make it possible for these kids and families to be successful. And there's so many things that go into it that we don't have enough funding for. We don't have enough resources for. So we try to work extra hard. One of the things that I do is I take on funds goods requests. So basically the caseworkers will send requests, and I oversee all of our restricted funds. So we'll get funds or grants for some of our restricted funds. Our biggest one is called the Help Fund. And we can kind of help with those financial, fill in those financial gaps. So if we've got a kid that's going into a kinship home, which is a family member's home, and they really can't afford to get them a dresser or a bed, we can help with some of that funding to get that for them. Lice treatment, we help cover that a lot. We cover some graduation fees. We've helped get clothing for kiddos that are, going for job applications. An example would be one of our kids was wanting to go into welding tech school, so we got him all the supplies that he needed for that. So there's just really so many gaps that we need that funding for to help. So there's just so many different things that we're constantly doing. And when we do campus tours or meet with donors, it's very overwhelming. They don't realize everything that we do. I mean, there's just so many cogs that are trying to make this giant machine work. And, we always constantly hear that, child welfare is broken and it needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it's never going to be fixed. There's just too much human error involved. Right. It's a really sad reality that you face, and you learn very quickly whenever you step out of school and into the social work world that, you come into it, like, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to change every single child's life. I'm going to make everybody successful. And you realize very quickly, you're very humbled that, the impact that you make is very, very small. And you have to be willing to accept that, and you have to be willing to understand that you can't take everything personal. You're going to have a lot of people screaming at you on social media, the parents in meetings, children, and you just got to realize that the things that are going on in other people's lives really have very little to do with you. Yeah. And it's not all about you, and your idea of what's best for them is probably not their idea of what's best for them. And you really need to learn to humble yourself and take a step back and use that power of the pause, where you really stop and think, is what I'm about to do, what I'm about to say, going to provide any kind of value? So going back to my why, I kind of had a difficult childhood. There were some things, that happened that kind of led me towards this. And honestly, even going into college, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. I knew what social workers were, but it was more, I only knew them on one platform, which is what most people know them as, is, the baby snatchers, the ones that take the kids. And I had a friend that, had to go through the court system because, she was abused. And, she and I were both assigned a caseworker, a social worker, because, she needed that extra support, and she came out to me about it. So that was kind of my first introduction to social workers. And as I got into college, I actually started out in speech language pathology, which I very quickly realized was not for me. And whenever I was in JUCO, actually, I did theater. I'm a huge fine arts person. I did ballet for 20 years. I did dance team. Singing, theater, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of did that and floated my way into Fort Hays. And my advisor kind of did an assessment on me, and she said, you're actually scoring really high on, maybe being a social worker. And I was like, But when I got into that, I really realized that was going to be my passion. That was what I wanted to do, and I wanted to help others. And, I always tell the social work students that I talk to now, I say, it's amazing that you want to do this, but you do need to realize, you need to lower your expectations on the impact you're going to make, for one, not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but you also need to make sure that you're dealing with your own trauma before you step into a whole load of other people's trauma. Because I do feel like that's the reason a lot of social workers burn out so fast, is they come into it with their own past trauma that they haven't dealt with. And a lot of them have been, in care themselves, and they don't realize they haven't dealt with it. And then coming back into that and immediately stepping into that first meeting and having parents screaming in your face is, it's very eye-opening, and it's awful. So yeah, my why is basically I still want to make that difference. I think that's why we all do it. We want to make a difference. But, and this is my way of doing that. I'm kind of on the back end, kind of directing things and providing the information necessary. And I'm doing it in a healthy way for myself, but I'm also serving that passion for what I still consider to be all of my kids. Autumn is still and will always be one of my kids, even though she's a mom and not really that much younger than me. So,
right. Well, and I go ahead, Autumn.
I say, and like 5 inches taller than you.
Yeah. I can lay my head on her shoulder.
Well, and what I hear you saying, I think it's important. I mean, in my opinion, I think it's important that I interject this, and it's that aim small, miss small. You may never impact the institution like you would like it to be impacted, right? To see removal rates from homes down, or placement back with homes up, or whatever the case may be. But if you set your expectation to be, I want to impact this person's life.
Right.
How do I, like on a case-by-case basis, you might have 100 youth that come across your path for somebody that is trying to instigate change in an individual's life for the future. But what's the expectation, right? I mean, are you trying to get 99 out of the 100, or are you trying to get 10 out of the 100? I mean, or are you just looking at it from the perspective of, I am just a part of this person's lifetime? Exactly. Right. That and I got to say, after hearing what Autumn said and understanding more about on the last podcast, and understanding more about Ember Hope, and then understanding the need for these youngsters to get help, and that they are in this situation oftentimes as victims. I mean, not to say that everybody that's in that situation is a product of a situation that they were victimized, but I would say the mass majority, that is the case. And then how do we help these people,
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about on our own podcast quite a bit is how these issues are systemic. And so Tamber was mentioning that it can be difficult because everybody says the child welfare system is broken. Well, there are a number of systems that are currently broken, and those all tie together. Right. Unless you fix all of them all at once simultaneously, they can't be 100% corrected. Like the kids who get pulled from their homes, odds are good that their parents struggled with addiction or poverty or some kind of neglect or abuse. And then you look at their grandparents. What did they struggle with? You look at their great grandparents. What did they struggle with? It wasn't 9 times out of 10. It wasn't a first generation just right out the gate. Like there was a number of culminating factors that led to that. And so that's when there's these criticisms of the child welfare system. Like there's, it ties into the criminal justice system. It ties into how we handle mental health treatment, how we handle addictions treatment. Just a vast number of things. It's not just one problem or one branch of this giant tree.
Yeah, and I got to say, in the past, I believe that it was very taboo, right? Just having this discussion when you talk about abuse, mental health, addiction, the whole thing, right? And so I want to believe, and do believe, that as a society, we might be waking up or turning the corner where over and over and over again, we're seeing that these are factors that we have to address at some level, because doing nothing means that just travels from generation to generation, and as population increases, that just means that the people that, like you had said, Autumn, that the grandpa that then has a couple 3 kids, or grandma a couple 3 kids, and then they have a couple 3 kids, and now we have from the original point of 2 people, now we have 15, and then we have 30, and that just compounds, and if we don't address it, I don't know where we're going to be. Just real quick, you had mentioned on the last program your why, but would you share with the audience your why?
Yeah, absolutely. I will do a more condensed version this go around. But for me, my why was, I was in the foster care system almost 10 years, about 11 or 12 to 18 when I aged out. And I had a lot of great people that were involved. Most of the people that were involved in my case or in my care were great. I had a couple of people that weren't, but I saw the people who were doing really good, and I saw the difference that they were making. And Tamber had mentioned, that some folks who go into this field or go into social work field come from care and they get re-traumatized, or they bring a lot of the baggage that they had. And everybody asked me, they're like, Autumn, are you going to be a social worker? And I was like, nope. I knew, I thankfully had my own mental wherewithal that I was like, that's not the route for me now. But I wanted to do something. And I had volunteered at Ember Hope a number of times, while I was working in higher education and while I was working in marketing and things like that. And so I always kind of kept my foot in the door, but I had never had this segue to go directly into child welfare, because, I just knew, I was like, I can't go into it because I'm going to re-traumatize myself. I'm not going to be of best service to the kids. Maybe someday if there's an admin role or something like that I can do. And then when the contract came open for Sedgwick County and I saw this position for marketing director, I was like, well, I'm going to shoot my shot. And because I had been working in marketing for quite some time. And like I said, I applied, and then Tamber messaged me and she's like, hey, I work at Ember Hope. And I was like, what? No way. But so that was my why for me, was to find a way to give back and to get involved and to provide a voice, because the marketing director has a really unique role. I get to be on the news a lot. I get to be on podcasts. I get to hold our own podcasts. I write all the press releases. Like, I am kind of the manager of the voice that goes out for Ember Hope. And so when I took on this role, I got to be, just very selective about making sure we were using the correct language, and making sure that we were, sharing positive stories, impact stories, but also saying, hey, negative stuff does happen, but here's the good that came from it, and so being able to manage that and tell these real, stories, and not just sugarcoat things or not just bypass things. And so I was like, I take that very seriously in my job. And so it feels really good to be able to be here to talk about these experiences. I can't go back and change those things that happened to me. I can't, but I can apply new meaning to them. Right. I can come out and speak on these things, and, I take it very seriously that when I speak, people look at me and hopefully, rebrand what a foster kid means. And I take that, very, very seriously, because I know that the stigma is there, and I want to change the way that looks.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your podcast. I know that's something new that you're doing, but just how do people find it? And then obviously the next question I would have is about, I think it's very important for people to see success when it comes to an individual that has had things happen, oftentimes trauma involved, that then are removed from their family and go into the foster care system, and then from there move on in life. And you had just said something, I probably won't repeat it word for word, but just in your own life, you said that this happened to you, and you are able to take what happened to you in order to learn from it and then be able to apply it in positive ways in your life. Isn't that the overall hope of what Ember Hope's trying to do, is to help these youth understand that, yes, this happened to you, but you're not and yes, in a way, you know, some of the things you experience, you're a product of that, but that doesn't have to be the end all.
Yeah.
You know, you're not doomed to forever be living in this trauma that you have. You're able to utilize these tools and the help and the love and the care that people have in the institution that you all are trying to make better day by day, right? Which is a huge lift. But then that way these youth have the ability to transition out and hopefully be very successful because of overcoming all the things that they had.
Yeah, I think, I'll talk about the podcast in just a second, but I think what one of my biggest goals would be is that I hope that people walk away, just general public, and know to speak life into these kids, because all too often growing up, I heard, you're just going to grow up and be a single mom. You're just going to grow up and, you know, you're never going to get married. You're just going to have different babies with different partners. You're never going to get a degree, you know, anything like that. That's what everybody, you're just going to be a drug addict. Like, that's what people would say to me and say to my brother and say to my foster brothers and sisters. And it was just, everybody would write us off. When you walked in the door, you know, the bulk of people would say, "Ooh, great, so glad she's in my classroom," or whatever. You know, and you had to fight tooth and nail. You had to fight harder than the other kids to prove, one, that you were, you know, you're just a normal kid. I can't even tell you the amount of times that I had my like something would go missing and they'd search my locker. It was never in my locker.
Yeah.
And it took them 10 times to search my locker to find I didn't steal those shoes. I didn't steal that phone. I've never stolen anything. And they're like, "Oh, maybe we should stop looking in Autumn's locker." And I'm like, "Maybe you should," you know? And so that's what I want the general public to know is, yes, these kids do come from trauma, and some of them have some elevated trauma behaviors, but they have had these people, including maybe even their parents, speaking these negative things in their ear. And so I would challenge you, just listeners, you know, if you do know of a foster kid or even an at-risk kid, maybe they're still living in a home or situation's not so great, or, you know, whatever the case may be, just speak life into them. Be like, "Hey man, I know it's rough right now, but I believe in you, and let me know if you need anything." You know, whether you're a teacher or a coach or, you know, just a community member, a pastor, or whatever. That would be my biggest thing, because I thankfully did, on the other hand, have people speaking life into me, and they're like, "Autumn, you should go to college. You're really smart." And I'm like, "Okay, how do I go to college?" And they're like, "There's credit hours." I was like, "What is that? How does that work?" Right. You know, I was a first generation college student, but you know, and I got the Pell Grant and I got foster care tuition waiver and all of that. But now my daughter she'll never be a Pell Grant recipient, because the system worked. You know what I'm saying? I got the Pell Grant money. I went and got a degree. I married somebody who also got a degree. And now I can say my daughter is not a first generation college student.
Right.
That's the goal.
And it really makes all the difference when you have that positive adult connection.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these kids step out into the world with nobody. Mm-hmm. There's just nobody on their side. They're just facing everything alone. And that can really make all of the difference. And, you know, some of these kids do have, you know, a lot of problem with relationships, building those relationships.
Trust, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They don't trust, you know, authority figures. They don't trust adults. And so they'll really test you. And even when they're still in care, they'll trust you. So, yeah, you know, like you said, as an adult, you really need to make that conscious effort. It's not going to be easy forming that relationship with that teen. I mean, it's really not. I mean, they're going to test you over and over and over to make sure that you're loyal. So that's how they do it. And you just got to stick in there and through thick and thin. And, you know, they're going to be difficult, but they need those connections. They need more than one connection. But as long as they have one, and that's the big thing with Hope Estates, is trying to make sure that they have at least one positive adult connection that they can reach out to if they need something. Even if it's just somebody to talk to or ask for advice, somebody to, you know, cross-check their application, you know, help with their homework, you know, anything. A lot of these kids have no idea what the real world is or how to do any of it. They don't know how to go get a bank card. They don't know how to apply for assistance. They don't know how to apply for a job.
I got to say something that just came to me. It's interesting what you're saying, because something that just came to me was, we're talking a lot about these youth that are struggling, and all the things that you just mentioned, this what other people would take as common knowledge, right? Like if you know somebody or a parent that was in college, then they know how to work the system and how to get through the system or whatever the case would be. But you have kids that aren't. So likewise, it's almost as though people that have not been in that situation don't have, just like the youngster that doesn't know how to navigate through all these processes. You have somebody that cannot conceptualize that because they've always inherently had that, right? So a part of this whole thing to me is hopefully people are listening to this and they're becoming more aware of, wow, it's because I want to say it's very, I don't want to say sad because that's not the right word that is going to use for what I'm experiencing, but it's very unfortunate, I think, is what I'm honing in on. Is it's very unfortunate, first and foremost, that we have the broken families and we have these kids that are put in this situation and they're lacking all of these, what you would consider normal, right? For hey, this is how you do ABC and XYZ, or even just like reading. You take kids that are learning how to read, if they don't have that at home, their parents are all this. But then there's also the flip side of that if people are listening to this podcast right now and they're going, my goodness, I really have, it's very difficult to understand how all of these individuals have never had these experiences in order to be successful, so they need this help. I mean, how, that gets into to me, like volunteering. Right? You have people that if you knew the need, if you knew how you could just simply help in one small way to impact a youth's life, like Autumn said, I don't know, when I'm one of those people that I do understand the struggle, but when you really stop to think about every single thing both of you just expressed, it's almost overwhelming. And I couldn't imagine how a youngster would feel not knowing it, and then the world around them not even being able to see life through their eyes or have walked a day in their shoes.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, as an adult, you're overwhelmed day to day. There's just so much coming at you all the time. And these kids are smart. They're very smart. They're street smart.
Resourceful.
They're resourceful. They're systemized, unfortunately, in the fact that they know what to do to get what they want. And that's not always the best way to do it. But yes, the simple things, that we don't really think about, that we're observing our parents do day in and day out, they don't have that opportunity. A lot of times they weren't taught what an appropriate relationship looks like. So they're going to immediately step into the same kind of relationship because that's all that they've had to go off of. And that's what happens with that systematic piece, the cycle of, poverty and, kids who are in foster care, their kids going into foster care. It's, they need that support. They need that one person saying, there's another choice. You have choices to make, and you can make good choices for yourself. You can make bad choices, but they're your choices. So you make the choice.
Yeah, that's it. One thing to consider is, when you see a foster kiddo, or, and they're behind in school, or their social skills are behind, or, something like that, it's like you have to remember that kid, instead of focusing on school, or instead of, focusing on how to fit in with peers, they were focusing on how to eat, how to survive, how to stay safe, how to stay warm, so they were in survival mode, maybe even from a very, very young age. And one just very small example from my life is I remember being in basketball, and my coach was a little frustrated with me because I couldn't stay over the week of Thanksgiving for basketball practice. And I'm a tall girl. I was the post, and he's like, Autumn, I need you here. And I was like, but this is the first week I get to spend Thanksgiving with my family in a very long time, and my family lives 3 hours away. So and transportation can only take me back and forth one time, so I'm just going to have to miss these practices. And he was really upset by that, which I understand. I made a commitment to a team, but I was like, I want to go see my family, and that's not anything that any of the other girls on the team had to decide between. And so, there are times it's like we're faced with decisions that kids our age should not have to make, and we just do the best we can with the information that we have.
Right. Okay, so just making sure that we cover this accordingly. Can somebody once again cover what the trifecta that you guys have coming up, the date, the time, how people can be involved? I mean, we're cutting it pretty close, so as far as dates and stuff, I think it would be difficult. Maybe you all could still take some volunteers. I don't know if somebody listening to this program, but I know overall, if somebody's listening to this program, it might not just be for these upcoming events that you have, but just going and being a part, showing up, and then from there, obviously saying, hey, I want to be able to volunteer or give some way, somehow, of my time, my energy, and my effort to Ember Hope.
Yeah, so I was just pulling up, we talked about, that this definitely wasn't just a couple of people being like, hey, let's do this. I do want to mention that we did have some really amazing sponsors, such as the Heston Chamber, Fuquay Insurance, Dance Cycle, and then Hooray Grill is cooking all of the food that was donated by Cargill. So I just want to give a quick shout out to those amazing folks. But there is still time to get involved. As of this moment, there are some volunteer opportunities still, such as parking cars, of course, cleaning up afterwards. I'm sure we'll always, need some extra hands to clean up. But start at Twister City in Park City. You start checking in around noon. You can register online in advance or secure your free concert tickets in advance at emberhope.org/events, and then click on the Ignite Hope Fest banner. But you can show up day of, register. I know a lot of people wait, especially cyclists, to make sure it's nice outside. Right. So just show up to Twister City. Bikes roll out at 2 p.m. and then go down the list of stops. And then,
it can be bikes and cars. We're encouraging anybody who wants to do the poker run to do that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then, check in for the car show. If anybody has a cool car, a cool motorcycle, and they want to check into the car show, again, you can register in advance, or, again, if nobody wants to get out there, really sweet Firebird if it's going to hail. So I totally understand wanting to register the day of, but that'll be at Heston High School, and then stick around, for the free concert. But the car show is free to walk around for the general public. So we invite anybody to come out who wants to come out. We will have some Ember Hope information. So if somebody wants more information about fostering, volunteering, donating, anything like that, they can stop by the Ember Hope booth.
Cool.
And we'll have barbecue. So, and if it'll be $5 a plate, so should be good food.
Well, that ain't nothing for a barbecue meal.
Yeah,
I know.
We're really trying to make it, affordable. We don't want it. We want everybody to come. Yes, we would like to raise some funds, but even if you're going to come out and just walk around the car show for free and buy a plate of food and go into the concert for free. So even if it's $5, really we just want people to show up, and that's a big piece to us. Raising awareness is a big thing. So coming out to support us.
Yeah.
Right.
And the concert starts at 7 o'clock, but the doors open at 6:15. So, and that will be, everything's going to be rain or shine. Please
shine.
We are manifesting. We're manifesting the shine. Maybe like an 80 degree day.
Beautiful spring day.
We're manifesting it.
Yeah. And then just real quick on the podcast, if you are interested in hearing some more in-depth stories on, we've had some really great guests, including a 20 plus year veteran of child welfare and foster parent on, and he shared a really emotional story. But our podcast is on Spotify, it's on YouTube, it's Little Sparks Big Hope. So if you type that into Google or Spotify, anything, you should find it right away.
Little Sparks Big Hope.
Yeah.
Little Sparks Big Hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's very cool. When I saw it come across my feed, I really appreciate what you're doing, and that is that you are bringing guests on the program, and you're just bringing awareness and personal life to those that have been on both sides of the fence when it comes to foster here, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, all three. So there's three hosts. Three of us gals are hosts. I'm a former foster youth. One is an adoptive parent, and then one is a former case manager. So we have some huge insight from the different aspects.
Yeah. And let me encourage you on that. Just keep plugging away.
Yeah.
Because telling stories of people's lives, if you want for at least one person to hear that, then from there change a heart and a life. Because I'm a community person and know that with what you're doing, with what both of you do, you're just a part of it. You really, Tamara, opened up the realization to me that Ember Hope is a huge organization that affects countless lives, that has countless employees. I think we should never underestimate the impact that one person can have on another person's life. Right. And then what that person's impact, who was impacted, can have on the next and the next. That's community is key, man.
And that's really the why, is if I can make a difference in one person's life. And I think that, Autumn really brought that back to me. And I think she came into my life at a really good time because, it was at that point where I was like, man, do I even want to renew my social work license? Do I want to do social work again? And she kind of stepped in my life and I was like, look how successful she is.
Yes, yeah.
I was like, she's married.
That's what you need. That's the hope.
Yeah. I was like, she's just living this dream that I knew was possible, if only she would grasp it. And of course, she was just the sweetest thing ever. She never did a thing wrong. She was so afraid of disappointing anybody and everybody. And so she was the one that I didn't have to worry about. So I enjoyed going and visiting her. So we just sit and bring some snacks. Yeah. But I mean, just to know and to be able to have this relationship with her is just so special to me. And I think back on that time with her all the time, really feeling just down and discouraged and depressed, like, man, I'm not doing crap in this. Like, why am I even doing this? And, but then I came to that realization, if I can just touch one person's life and they can carry it forward,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why our current tagline is, will you be the one? Mm-hmm. So that's the question we ask. Will you be the one? So.
Very cool. Okay, ladies, we are coming to the end of the program. One thing that I always do, I don't know if Tamara's seen this or not, but I know Autumn has, and she's gotten this question last time. I just want to give the guest the last word to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of everybody listening. You can say whatever you want. What do you got? Tamara, first?
You want to go first, Tamber?
You go first.
Tamber, I call you Tamara. Oh my goodness, this whole time.
Progressively the whole time it's kind of changed a little bit.
You've got to, absolutely.
I have a weird name.
Why, Tamber? Why did you do that through this whole podcast? You just let me fail. Hey, whatever.
You figure it out eventually.
No, it's not me. Tamber, I am so. Oh my God.
I get so many different names. It's like we get Timber, Tamara.
I'm sorry.
Or we get combined, and I just get called Amber. She's like, so we're just one hive mind. Well, Amber.
I did this. Yeah,
I was like, is he talking to me?
For what it's worth.
Is Tamara in the room with us?
Oh my God.
Who's Tamara?
It's like he's gonna be like, somebody's gonna be watching this, like, well, who's he talking about? I thought her name was Tamber, and nobody said anything. That is not fair. You guys, straight. No way. I can't let it. I mean, I do occasionally mess up names. I do it. I think I have called you Amber.
That's it took 4 takes to get my last name the last time I was here.
Oh my goodness gracious. That's not even fair. That's not fair at all. You guys
I just let it
don't ever come on the podcast. The guy can't even pronounce your name right.
Yeah.
The whole podcast he called me Tamara. Who the hell is Tamara?
But that's even a new one for me. I've never heard Tamara. I've heard like Tamara, Tambra. I'm like, well, that's a new one, but
Tambourine.
Let's just go with it.
Tambourine. We have Tamburino.
I don't even know know who he was talking about the whole time. I just pretended I was her.
Tamara. I'm like, Tamara. And I'm like, I don't want to. Yes,
too,
right.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I was thinking to myself, I think I got this, right? I don't want to like mispronounce her name. And then it's like, oh, God.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Final
funny.
words. My final word. I'm going to go first. I never do this, but I just got to say, whenever you have a podcast with people on who are guests, make sure that you do not mess up their name.
Just write it down.
Tamber and Autumn. Tamber and Autumn. Okay. All right. Tamber, you go first.
Okay, so what I would want people to leave with is, kind of what I've toted this whole time is if you can make the difference, make just the tiniest bit of difference in somebody's life, even, we have a good friend who's going through a hard time right now. And she even said that, a couple of the things that I said really stuck with her. And I'm like, man, I wouldn't even thought of that, that would stick with you. But it, has really kind of changed the trajectory of, her confidence in moving forward with her life and making some really hard decisions. And, the smallest thing that you do, you may not feel like it makes that big of a difference, but we are all just floating along together, living the best that we can, doing the best that we can. Be patient with each other. Realize that, if somebody's not treating you nicely, you don't know what's going on in their life. You still reach out that hand of kindness, speak some goodness into their day. I mean, they may not be receptive of it, but I guarantee they're going to think about it later. And, they're going to be like, well, she said she liked my hair today. So just try to be kinder to one another. I mean, I myself, I know it's hard. It's hard to do sometimes. You get really frustrated with people, but that's just kind of what I want to push. Whether that's somebody that you're just passing on the street or, a kiddo that says that they were a previous foster kid. Don't make any kind of assumptions. Reach out that hand that they need.
Yeah. I think too that, you're so spot on, but we're all fighting a battle that many don't know about. We're all going through something in life, and sometimes it's more outwardly obvious and sometimes it's not. And, just as Tamber said, just be kind. You never know what somebody's background is. You never know what somebody's going through. You never know who they just hung up with and what bad news they got, And so just give grace, give the same grace that you would hope that you would be given in that situation. And as our good friend Brett always says, to leave the wood pile higher than you found it. So, we all have times that we take, and just make sure that there are times where you give too. So just thanks for having us on again. We love being here, and thanks for helping just to spread this message and our mission.
Absolutely. Anytime, ladies, anytime. And next time, I promise.
Gonna write it down next time.
Tamborino.
I will never, ever forget your name. Trust me, it's like, oh, man.
Tamborino and Autumn Huerter on the mic.
All right.
Tomorrow.
All right. Well, I'll just say this. I appreciate everybody that's listening to this HCTalk podcast. You know me, as always. I'm your host, Lance Gormley. And we have Tamber and we have Autumn from Ember Hope. And we just appreciate you, ladies, and everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good one, everybody.